We've talked a lot on the channel before about how you've seen different retailers completely close up a lot of their stores due to too much theft and too much crime. Walmart and Target are the ones that really come to mind because they're the biggest ones. But in fact, you've seen, stores like Walgreens and CVS and Rite Aid, the smaller convenience stores that are people's pharmacies, close up more than anybody else. But Target recently put out a report about how them closing down these crime-ridden stores has actually been good for business for Target, but it also has big detrimental effects on the communities that are seeing the losses of these stores. So in Target's most recent earnings report, they reported lower inventory shrink, which is just the retail term for theft. And the reason for this is mainly because they've been closing down a bunch of their stores where they've seen the most theft. So over this past year, they've closed about 9 of the most crime-prone stores all across the country, from New York to Seattle. And basically, Target's saying, listen, we can't continue operating these stores because theft and organized retail crime are threatening the safety of our team and guests and contributing to unsustainable business performance. And then they go on to say that we know that our stores serve an important role in their communities, but we can only be successful if the working and shopping environment is safe for all. So this is a perfect example of, people always say in the channel, I see these comments all the time of, you get what you vote for. Well, this is definitely the case here, because people that live in these areas that allow this to happen, and all these thefts and crime go unchecked to the point where stores are leaving, this is made possible by the people who are in charge, the local police stations, the local politicians that are allowing this to happen, that are lenient on crime, that don't arrest people for theft and things like that. It's no wonder then you see these places leave if they can't compete. If they can't have a successful business, they're going to leave and go somewhere else where they can. But here's the thing. Now that Target is showing improvement in their earnings due to closing down their stores, you're likely to see a lot of other retailers follow suit because they're recognizing that this is a smart business practice that's working for Target, and it's likely to be replicated by other companies looking to do the same. In 2022, the National Retail Federation, they said that there was $112 billion industry-wide in theft or shrink, which is an increase of $20 billion from the previous year. So this is a growing problem that many retailers have to face, and if they can just narrow it down to, a dozen or half a dozen stores that are creating the biggest losses for them, well then I think the writing's on the wall, and it's a very simple decision for a lot of these companies to just close up shop and just forget about it. But then, like I said, what kind of effect does that have on the communities after that? Reading about this actually makes me think of certain places, like Oakland comes to mind, right across the bay here, guys, because they're talking about how this is going to create retail deserts where people have to travel farther for their daily necessities, but it also means you have fewer businesses open, which means fewer jobs in the area, and there's not as much of a reliable source of employment, and then you have even more people turn to theft and crime because there's no opportunity. So it creates this downward spiral in the community where the more places that close, the more people are desperate, the more people are going to turn to crime to get by. And that's exactly what you see happening in communities like Oakland. But you can also say that they do it to themselves, Clearly, the cops aren't doing their jobs in this area. Clearly, they have no intention of cleaning things up over there and doing things about it. I saw on the news here that they even have residents putting up barriers in the street to stop the big crazy car shows that happen. People doing burnouts and drag racing and all this kinds of stuff. They're putting their own barriers, but the city can go ahead and remove that kind of stuff. They go out there and remove it the next day. And even though people are doing this in order to try to keep their community safe, right? They go and remove that the next day, but they won't do anything about all the crime, the theft, and the shootings and all that stuff. I thought that was just mind-blowing that you have citizens that are looking to do something about it, looking to clean up their own community, and then the city officials go out there and remove these barriers because they say it does more harm than good. Well, so does crime, so does all the theft, so does all the shootings, so do all the car break-ins, so does all the stores closing down. I think that does more harm than good too. And for anybody wondering, I am walking amongst a new houseboat section I haven't been to yet here in Sausalito. Beautiful as always. And apparently something like this happened before in New York City back in the 70s and 80s, and crime was rampant, and it led to hundreds of stores closing throughout the city, and a bunch of people left. And then within just a few years, you had entire communities in New York that didn't have basic amenities like supermarkets and a drugstore. Nothing like that. And it looks like we're going to be on the verge of seeing this happen once again if these places can't get their act together with crime. And if the crime wasn't making it bad enough and hard enough to shop at these stores, here's something else that's going to be changing pretty soon in the near future, is you have more stores looking at adopting digital price tags. And the stores are insisting that this isn't going to do anything. This isn't going to make it so that they can just trick people into spending more. Nothing like that. This is all just to save labor and be more efficient in their operations, okay? Well, obviously, Walmart is going to be the big retailer who's going to be starting off doing this. And you have big grocery chains like Kroger. They're also going to be doing this as well. Apparently this is already a thing in Europe. So if you guys live in Europe out there, I have some European viewers, let us know if you see this already at your grocery stores or your retail stores there. But Walmart is planning to implement these digital labels in 2,300 stores by 2026. And of course, several of them in California already have them. I haven't seen it. I haven't even been to a Walmart here. But of course, they're promising that this is not going to be used to, price gouge and jack up prices unexpectedly on people. This is all for efficiency. Well, you can say the same thing about the Fed. Well, we're just here to, prevent high unemployment and prevent high inflation. We don't have any motivation to keep people poor. Nothing like that. They say, oh, this spares the employees time of, making printed labels and putting them in place, and it just increases our efficiency. Meanwhile, it also greatly increases their ability to take advantage of their customers, of course. So basically, these digital price tags allow these stores to transition into a, dynamic pricing format. This is something that Wendy's got in hot water for, because you already see, like rideshare companies like Uber and Lyft doing this, where they charge you more when you want to ride during peak hours, right? When you have the highest demand. And Wendy's got in hot water for attempting to implement this about a year ago. I even made a video about it. And a lot of people were saying, I'm not going to Wendy's anymore. Well, if retailers start doing this, you can easily expect that people aren't going to be going to stores like Walmart and Kroger either if they're going to be, doing surge pricing at these stores. And of course, they're saying they're not going to do this, but how are you going to know, right? Unless you're there from open to close, watching what the price tag says, you don't really know what they're charging from moment to moment, which is how fast it can change moving forward. And they can just do sneaky things like, they can raise the cost of ice cream on a hot day, or they can raise the cost of water and canned goods before an upcoming storm, which is something that you've seen happen already, especially where I live in Florida. When there's a hurricane, you see stores start to run out of these supplies, and a lot of places get in trouble for price gouging people. But Kroger and Walmart insist that this is only going to be used to actually lower prices for consumers, not increase them. Like, who believes that, guys? Who believes that their sole intention with this is just to lower prices? I mean, you can never trust what these people say because they're out to make a profit. Kroger says that any test of electronic shelf tags is to lower prices more for customers where it matters most. To suggest otherwise is not true. Walmart says that these updates are going to be just to reflect lower prices for items on sale or clearance, and prices will not change throughout the day. Well, once again, how are you going to know this unless you're sitting there monitoring how much they're charging for everything 24/7? There's no way anyone can do that. I mean, these companies are already making good profits right now, And if they're able to implement some sort of dynamic pricing in a sneaky way, even if they just raise the price on something, say 5 or 10 cents, you know, no one's really going to catch that. You know, if you're going in to buy ice cream, for example, and you know, it used to be $3.49 and now it's $3.69, that's a 20 cents increase. You know, is anybody really going to catch that? Probably not. You're just going to go in, pick it up, and buy it. But the reality is, once those digital price tags are in place, it makes it easy for them to change prices in either direction at will. So that's what people need to understand. Like this, they claim this is going to be a good thing, but I don't know how this can be good, you know? And the thing is, guys, there's so many things that, you know, people try to reinvent the wheel all the time with things, right? You know, one recent example I can give you in my own life that was really frustrating for the last couple of years is I always buy the latest iPhone, and I buy it because they're always updating the cameras, and I use the phone to shoot all these videos. So every year I buy the newest one. And a couple years ago, when they got rid of the SIM card tray, they're celebrating this as, oh, this is great, this makes it safer. You know, it's harder for somebody to steal your personal information off your phone by SIM swapping you, scams like that. Well, it also makes it harder to transition the old phone to the new phone, okay? And here's the funny thing, I have Cricket Wireless, right, for my main provider. In order to switch phones, you need to call Cricket and have them switch it manually. There's no way to do it on their website, online. I know other carriers have it where you just scan the QR code and you can do it and it's easy, but Cricket doesn't have that, at least not yet. And so the catch is, how do you call? You can't call Cricket and switch to the new phone if you're on the phone with them, right? And if you only have one phone, you literally can't make the transition. So every time I've had to do it, I've had to use my wife's phone to make the call to Cricket and have them swap the eSIM from one phone to the next. It's like, how does that make any sense? You know, how does it make sense to do that, guys? It's much more of a hassle than before. Before, I would just pop out the SIM card from the old phone, put it in the new phone, and literally 30 seconds later, I have service on the brand new phone. No problems, no transition period whatsoever. Now every time it's a half an hour on the phone with Cricket to make that transition. So they switched something, you know, technology wise, that was supposed to make things better for everybody, make it easier or safer, whatever. In fact, all it really did is make it more inconvenient, at least in my opinion. You know, other people have different carriers. Maybe it's not so hard if you just have to scan the QR code. That does make it a lot easier, but not all carriers are on board with that. So it's just another example of, you know, companies switching things, you know, us moving away from a technology that works just fine in favor of a newer one that's more exciting and better, just like the EV car situation, right? Oh, let's not make gas cars anymore, this is bad for the environment. Well, so are the EV cars, but this is somehow better, we need to switch to that. And then you find out it's nothing but problems when it comes to range issues, charging issues, battery fires, all these things that people are experiencing and dealing with. So we just see so many things technology-wise that are supposed to come out and be invented that are better than what it's supposed to replace, and many times the technology ends up being inferior. If I sat down, I could probably make an entire list and make a whole video about all the things that, you know, I've dealt with personally in my own life when it comes to changing technology. And it's not like I'm against moving forward, guys. I think, you know, certain technological advances are fantastic, but sometimes they're just not. And other times we're not ready for the advancement. And I think this digital price tag is an example of one of those things, you know? It's almost equivalent to replacing cash with a CBDC, right? You know, you're replacing paper with something digital that the value of can be changed at any moment, right? So this sets a dangerous precedent for people getting used to, you know, numbers on a screen just changing at will, and you all have to just like it or go home. Now, I will say that the only real incentive for retailers not to engage in this, you know, mischievous behavior is to keep prices competitive, right? Like, because you could say, well, if you shop online, then online retailers have been able to do this since day one, which is true. And it's something you see Amazon do a lot of, right? but their incentive as a retailer is to keep the price as low as possible and beat the competition, right? If you have a lot of stores that sell the same item, it's in the retailer's best interest to sell it at the lowest price if they want to get the sale. So that's the only thing I can think of that would prevent this from being completely insane down the road. Now, Jerome Powell recently gave his speech in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and one thing he said is kind of alarming in the sense that unemployment is now the Fed's biggest concern. Before it was inflation, and now they've immediately flipped and they're looking more at unemployment and how bad this is. Because one thing he said is, we do not seek or welcome further cooling in labor market conditions. So he's finally seeing and getting the hint that the labor market is upside down right now with how fast unemployment has gone up and how much the job openings have gone down in such a short period of time. He says the Fed has ample room to respond to any risks we may face, including the risk of unwelcome further weakening in labor market conditions, which just means, yeah, we're ready to cut rates and on a moment's notice, including maybe emergency cuts if we have to. So this is following the playbook of all these past recessions where we've seen asset prices skyrocket to where it's unaffordable to buy a house and the stock market is at all-time highs, and then unemployment starts shooting through the roof and they start emergency rate cutting. This is exactly what's happened the last couple of significant recessions, guys. And the good thing is, if you know that's probably what's going to happen and this is the route they're going to take, then you can make the best educated decisions for yourself on what to do with your money moving forward. Because all you got to do is look at what happened back then, and it's reasonable to think that we're going to see a lot of the similar things happen again this time. However, we thought that about interest rates too, because the Fed raised interest rates. We thought that was going to tank things and slow everything down, but it didn't. The stock market kept climbing and the housing market kept climbing. And that's the argument where people say, well, this time it's actually different because those interest rate hikes didn't have the effect that the Fed was looking for. But in reality, what I think, and some other people think as well, that they just didn't raise interest rates high enough. They did raise them pretty quickly, but the rates never got high enough to have the effect that they were really hoping for. They're only kind of starting to now, and now they're already looking at reversing it before inflation has even come down to their target. And then you have some people saying, well, once they start cutting, then that's going to lead to inflation coming down even further, because basically they're in emergency mode. They're trying to save the economy, and inflation will come down because people won't be spending as much money anymore, which could end up being the case. We don't know yet, because even though that's what's happened in the past, it might not happen that way this time, just like other things didn't happen the way that it was expected to happen. Powell even said in his speech that the upside risks to inflation have diminished. Well, I don't think that's actually true this time, because things are actually different this time around. Then as soon as they start cutting rates, it could lead to increased spending. There's a lot of people that do have a lot of money, even though a lot of people are going broke and falling on hard times. You have a lot of people who aren't going broke and are doing better than ever right now, and rates coming down can fuel higher inflation. It's just what might happen. Even during the GFC, guys, the worst recession in this lifetime, we saw unemployment go up to 10%. Well, that means 90% of people still have a job. And you could say, well, the government data is not good and it's not accurate, which we know also to be true. And you could say, well, maybe unemployment was actually worse than 10% back then. And maybe it was 15 or 20%. But even if it was double what they said it was at 20%, that means 80% still have a job and are still working. But they're looking at, hey, unemployment not that long ago was 3.4% a year and a half ago, and now it's flipped the other way around to 4.3%. So they're starting to realize that, hey, maybe it's time to start cutting the rates. And I disagree. I think they should just keep them higher, and they should be even higher than they are right now until it causes some real significant pain. But I'm not the one in charge, so I don't get to make that decision. But what's really going to happen is they're going to go ahead and cut rates, and it's probably going to have some unexpected results and consequences, to say the least. And it's funny to me that they don't even know their own history. Like, every time they start emergency cutting the interest rates, then unemployment shoots up. They don't just look at that as the past, like maybe this isn't the right answer to the problem. No, let's just repeat the same mistakes of the past once again. So now that we know that the fight on inflation is essentially over, right? They have no more dedication to the fight on inflation. They've already turned the page on that and are looking at the labor market. It leaves a big opening for inflation to go back up, you know? So if you know that, then you can kind of make moves in your own financial life and buy things that you believe to be a hedge against inflation in the future. And that could be one of the reasons why you still see people buying real estate at all-time high prices, because they believe that inflation will get worse in the future. And it's going to be a way to protect their wealth. I mean, long term, I think it's a great play. Short term, not so much. I've shown you guys different examples of prices coming down severely in different areas. People buying listings just a year and a half ago at a much higher price than what they have it for sale for today, and can't unload it. So people who are in it for the quick buck, just like people in the stock market, stand to lose the most. But if you have some patience and you can wait it out, then it's probably going to be a good investment long term. But you got to be able to handle the carrying costs. You got to be able to, you know, make the numbers work in the meantime in order for that to happen. And that's where most people get screwed up. We have a lot of economists saying that home prices are not going to fall meaningfully without significant job losses. Well, we're already seeing significant job losses, so much so to the point where the Fed is worried about it and has completely abandoned their fight on inflation and is focusing solely on unemployment now. You have a lot of economists saying that there's unlikely to be a meaningful decline in prices without significant job losses, and the root cause for housing affordability has been underbuilding for the past 15 years. So they're still hanging on to this, you know, low supply narrative that somehow we just don't have enough homes in this country to go around for everybody who wants to buy them, which is not true. It's just that those homes are not for sale right now because so many people are stuck, guys. They just cannot move out of those houses because they can't afford to in most cases, and there's just nowhere else to go. Who's going to give up a better deal today for a worse deal tomorrow? Nobody in their right mind is going to do that. And once the interest rates start coming down low enough, I think that's when you're going to see this whole thing play out in real time, because you're going to see the interest rates come down. That will incentivize more home sellers to put their house on the market, which we're already seeing happen now, but it will be to an even higher degree. But the buyers aren't going to be there. They're not going to show up. So therefore, the inventory keeps building and building and building. And what happens next? The people who really need to sell, they have to lower the price, guys. You're seeing it in many markets across the country already now, without the rates even coming down significantly yet. And don't get me wrong, there are going to be markets that do see an upshot in prices when the rates come down. And those are going to be the markets that are already affordable, you know, places where people can already easily afford to buy a house at today's prices and rates, and then the rates come down even further. Well, yeah, no kidding. Of course you're going to see the price of those houses go up because people are not struggling to pay for them, you know. But in so many other markets, that's not the case. You see people are not able to buy these houses at today's prices, and having the rates come down just by a little bit isn't really going to do much. But to the economist's point that we're not going to see home prices come down significantly without unemployment rising significantly, well, it is rising significantly, so much so that it recently triggered the SOM rule, which says that if unemployment goes up more than 0.5% within a 12-month period, then we're in a recession. And every time we hit a recession, we see unemployment go up. So if we need to see higher unemployment for home prices to come down, it looks like we're well on our way. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.